My 33-year-old mom passed away in August 2022 from esophageal cancer. I quit my job as a home care aide so I could become her caregiver once she was admitted to hospice. I was helping every day anyways because I lived with her and my dad. Nobody helped me. She had an incredible hospice team, but they weren't there every day all day. I cleaned her up, made sure she had everything she needed, coordinated everything with hospice. My dad dealt with things by burying his head in the TV and ignoring it. The final week of her life, I got only a handful of hours of sleep because I was having to administer her medications every hour. It was all worth it to me. She was my best friend in the whole world, but it was extremely traumatic, especially whenever she had to be turned to be cleaned. The sound of her screams will forever haunt me. My sister, who is 42 years old, couldn't come help because she's barely mobile because of her weight. She lives 10 minutes from us, but hadn't been over in 5 years. By the time she made it here, our mom was so out of it that she couldn't carry a conversation. Before she died, when she was still lucid, my mom told me she wanted me to handle all of her affairs after she passed, planning her celebration of life, her cremation, and the distribution of her things. She also said she wanted me to have her wedding ring, cost $400, her diamond necklace earring set, cost $349, and her 2014 Mazda 3, even though I don't drive, in case I wanted to learn, and if not, she said I could sell it. Well, I have opted to not drive, and so I'm selling it to my dad's girlfriend's granddaughter for $3,000. My sister is extremely jealous, very on brand for her, because she said her husband could sell it for $10,000 and they could get a commission. I said we already have a buyer. But I am paying her husband $150 to detail the car. My sister is very upset they're not making any money off the sale, and she finally blew up at me last night. She said our mom would be upset if she knew I was selling the car for cash. I told her what our mom said, that it was up to me. She says it's so funny how I get everything of value of our mom's, and she only gets some of her ashes and sentimental items. I told her I didn't know what to say, that our mom left those things for me. She hung up on me, and so I sent this before blocking her. Excuse me, I'm the one who busted my freaking butt taking care of her in her final days. I held her hands as she lay dying. Not you, not Dad, not anyone. Me. So yeah, she gave me more than anyone else, because I was the one there for her through all of it. You didn't even try to come over here for a whole 5 freaking years. So you can take your butthurt, bitter butt attitude and shove it up your butt, dude. I'm not doing this with you. Feel how you want to feel. I really don't care. I have enough on my plate. I don't have time for pity parties. Am I the idiot? I'm questioning myself and starting to feel guilty. What do you all think? Now for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. Not the idiot. First, my deepest condolences to you. Been there, done that with my mother and my mother-in-law. It's a rough road to travel, but in the end, I wouldn't trade the experience of being there for the people I loved at the end of their time here on Earth. Second, your message to your sister is perfect. She couldn't be bothered to do the heavy lifting, but wants a participation trophy. Comment 2. Not the idiot. She says it's so funny how I get everything of value from our mom, and she only gets some of her ashes and sentimental items. The sentimental items have value. It's a shame your sister only cares about the money aspect of things. Now, for the update. Hey everyone, thanks for all the support on my last post. It's been a wild couple of weeks since then, and I've got quite the update for you all. So, after I blocked my sister, things took a turn. Dad's girlfriend, let's call her Linda, got involved. Linda has always been the peacemaker type, and she tried to mediate between my sister and me. She suggested we all sit down and talk it out. I agreed, thinking maybe we could finally clear the air. The meeting was tense from the start. My sister came in with a chip on her shoulder, and I was on edge. We sat in the living room, the same room where Mom had spent her last days. It felt like her presence was still there, watching over us. Linda started by saying how Mom would have wanted us to stick together. My sister rolled her eyes, but I could tell she was listening. I took a deep breath and explained again why Mom left me the items and how I had been there for her. I told her about the sleepless nights, the screams that still echoed in my head, and how I had put my life on hold to care for Mom. My sister's face softened a bit. She admitted she felt guilty for not being there, and that her anger was more at herself than at me. I was shocked. This was the first time she had ever shown any remorse. But just as we were making progress, Linda's phone rang. It was her granddaughter, the one buying the car. She was outside, ready to pick it up. I excused myself to go handle the transaction. When I came back, I found my sister in tears. Linda was comforting her, and I felt a pang of sympathy. Maybe we could finally mend our relationship. The next day, Linda's granddaughter called me. She was ecstatic about the car and thanked me for the great deal. She mentioned offhand how she couldn't believe the car was only $3,000 when it was worth so much more. I felt a twinge of guilt, but brushed it off. It was my car to sell, after all. A few days later, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was my sister's husband. He was furious, accusing me of cheating them out of money. He claimed that he had a buyer willing to pay $10,000 for the car, and that I had stolen that opportunity from them. I was floored. My sister had twisted the story, making it seem like I had gone behind their backs for a quick sale. I tried to explain that wasn't the case, but he wouldn't listen. He hung up on me, and I was left feeling betrayed all over again. The next day, I got a text from my sister. She apologized for her husband's outburst and asked if we could talk. I agreed, still hoping we could work things out. We met at a coffee shop, a neutral ground. She looked tired, and I realized how much this feud was weighing on both of us. She explained that her husband had misunderstood the situation. He thought they were entitled to a cut of the sale because he had offered to detail the car. I explained that I had already agreed to sell the car to Linda's granddaughter before he had even offered to detail it. The $150 was a separate payment for his services, not a commission. My sister seemed to understand, and we both laughed at the ridiculousness of the situation. We talked for hours, going over old memories of Mom and our childhood. It felt like we were finally reconnecting. But as we were leaving, my sister mentioned how she still felt left out of Mom's will. I reminded her that Mom had made her wishes clear and that I was just following them. My sister nodded, but I could tell she was still hurt. I promised to help her find something of Mom's that she could keep, something that would mean as much to her as the wedding ring did to me. As we hugged goodbye, I felt a sense of closure. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. And as I walked away, I realized that maybe, just maybe, we could find a way to be a family again. But then, just when I thought things were settling down, I got a message from Linda. She said her granddaughter had been in a minor accident with the car. Nothing serious, but the car had a few scratches now. And guess who she had called to vent about it? My sister. My sister had taken this as proof that I had sold a faulty car and was now demanding that I take it back and give her the money instead. I couldn't believe it. After all the progress we had made, we were back to square one. I tried to explain that a minor accident had nothing to do with the car's condition at the time of sale, but my sister wouldn't hear it. She was convinced I had somehow scammed her and Linda's granddaughter. Stepdad keeps making inappropriate comments about my son's hair and suggests he's not my husband's. Oh boy, he demands an apology from my husband. I, a 28-year-old female, recently gave birth to my son. My son has blonde hair, just like I did when I was around 4 years old, although my hair has since darkened over time. My husband has black hair, and both of our families have similar hair colors. No one has reacted negatively towards our son having blonde hair. My mom and stepdad usually come over once a week. My stepdad and I don't have a notably good or bad relationship. However, every time they visit, he makes comments about my son's hair. He jokes about getting a DNA kit for my husband and son, asks if my husband should check my phone, or if I have any attractive blonde co-workers I've spent a lot of time with. My husband and I always tell him to stop and explain that it's basic genetics due to my own blonde hair. We've been polite in asking him to stop, but we don't find it funny at all. My mom doesn't say anything, and when I asked her to make him stop, she said she doesn't want to interfere with our relationship, and that my husband and I should talk to him more. During their last visit, my husband went to the kitchen to grab some snacks, and my stepdad followed him. Shortly after, I heard my husband slam a cabinet and loudly tell my stepdad to shut up or leave immediately. My mom and I went to see what happened, and my husband explained that my stepdad was once again making comments about me cheating on him. My husband lost his temper, and I did as well. I told them to leave and not to come back until my stepdad apologizes. They tried to explain that it was just a joke, but I insisted they leave. Eventually, they did. Later that night, I texted my mom to explain myself and apologize for kicking her out as well. She responded by saying that my stepdad is feeling down and disappointed in how my husband treated him. They both expected apologies and a lot of effort to make up for the incident. I feel terrible and guilty. I know I hurt my mom and stepdad, and I may have made a harsh decision. My sister understands my frustration, but thinks my reaction was unnecessary. My husband supports me and is glad they won't be coming over anymore. If I was in the wrong for reacting this way, I will apologize. Now for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. Wow. I'm sorry. I don't find things like this to be remotely amusing because they are so hurtful. Upon hearing you don't like the joke, the matter should have been forever dropped, not the jerk. I don't care if other people shrug this kind of thing off. You clearly don't. I grew up hearing the jokes about how I must be the milkman's kid because some of the family swore. I presented in childhood as looking like my mom and not my daddy. I remember feeling hurt and then really angry every single time. My grandfather one day just lost it, told his daughters, my dad's sisters, how cruel and unfunny I found it when I was like 13. So again, if you don't think it's funny, it's not a damn joke. You did the right thing. Good for you. Mom, if you leave me to manage your husband, he will get schooled and get his feelings hurt every single time. This is on both of your heads. I am not tolerating another second of this trashy behavior. Thanks for listening. Comment 2. Not the jerk. You tried to talk to the both of them several times. It was evident that at some point the tone would rise. Is it ideal to scream at your stepdad? Of course not. But you're young parents and are already quite overwhelmed and had exhausted, literally, all other options. She would rather not interfere with our relationship with him. Cough, coward, cough. He was disappointed in how I let my husband treat him and that they both expected some apologies and a lot of work to make up for this. Screw that. How come the people who say hurtful things, or insinuate hurtful things, at least, are the first ones to talk about getting reparations? Now, for the update. Hey everyone, a lot has happened since my last post. I never expected things to escalate the way they did, but here we are. After the incident with my stepdad's inappropriate jokes about my son's hair and the confrontation with my husband, things went from bad to worse. My husband and I had a long talk that night, and we agreed that we wouldn't tolerate any more disrespect towards our family. We were a united front, and that gave me a bit of comfort despite the chaos. A few days passed with radio silence from my mom and stepdad. I thought maybe they were giving us space, but then I got a text from my mom. She said that my stepdad was still upset and that he wanted an apology from both me and my husband. I couldn't believe it. After all the hurtful comments and the tension he caused, he was the one demanding an apology. I was torn. My mom and I had always been close, and I hated the idea of our relationship suffering because of this. But I also knew that I couldn't just sweep everything under the rug. My husband was furious when I told him about the text. He reminded me that we had done nothing wrong and that we shouldn't apologize for standing up for our family. The next day, my sister called me. She had always been the peacemaker in the family, and she tried to mediate. She told me that my mom was really upset and that she felt caught in the middle. My sister suggested that maybe I could just apologize for the way things were said, not for what was said. I was hesitant, but I agreed to think about it. That evening, my husband and I were putting our son to bed when there was a knock at the door. It was my mom and stepdad. They had come unannounced, and I could tell by the look on my husband's face that he was not happy about it. My stepdad started off by saying he wanted to clear the air, but instead of apologizing, he doubled down on his jokes, saying that we were too sensitive and that he didn't mean anything by it. My husband was about to lose his temper again. But I stepped in. I told my stepdad that his comments were hurtful and that they had to stop if he wanted to be part of our son's life. My mom tried to smooth things over, saying that we all just needed to get along for the sake of the family. But then she said something that made my heart drop. She admitted that she had always had doubts about my husband and that she thought my stepdad's jokes were just his way of expressing his concerns. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My own mother had doubts about my husband, the man I loved and trusted with all my heart. It felt like a betrayal. I looked at my husband and I could see the pain in his eyes. He had always been so supportive of my relationship with my mom, and now this. The argument that followed was intense. My husband told my mom and stepdad that they had crossed a line and that they were no longer welcome in our home. My mom was crying, and my stepdad was shouting about respect and family loyalty. But I knew that we couldn't let this go on. I stood by my husband's side and told them that they needed to leave. As they left, my mom turned to me with tears in her eyes and said that she hoped I would come to my senses. But I felt like I was the one who had been blind all along. My sister called later that night and I told her everything. She was shocked and didn't know what to say. It's been a week now, and the house feels different. There's a sadness that wasn't there before, a sense of loss. My husband has been my rock, and we've been leaning on each other to get through this. Our son is too young to understand what's going on, but I hope that one day he'll know that we did what we thought was best for him. Sis has been living in my house for months and refuses to be alone with my kids, but then she invites her ex back into our lives. Boy, does she regret it. My wife, 38 years old, and I, 39 years old, have been married for 12 years and have 3 kids, a 10-year-old and 7-year-old twins. About 8 months ago, my wife's sister Anne, 29 years old, went through a pretty traumatic time. She found out she was pregnant with her longtime boyfriend of 6 years. It wasn't planned, but that didn't lessen the heartbreak when she lost the pregnancy at 10 weeks. To make things even worse, her boyfriend left her 2 months later. Anne lives about 15 minutes from us, so obviously we were there to support her with anything she needed. Neither my wife nor Anne are close to their parents at all, so we are pretty much the only family Anne has. Anne was understandably heartbroken by what happened and was struggling pretty hard. My wife was very diligent about making sure Anne didn't do anything stupid when her mental health was struggling, so she pretty much included her in everything we did, so she could keep an eye on her. This included turning an extra room in our house into a bedroom for Anne. The room had previously been a gaming playroom. For the past 6 months, Anne has been staying at our house 4 to 5 nights a week. She still has her own apartment, but she spends the vast majority of her time at our house and is included in pretty much all of our family plans. At first, I was understanding and knew my wife wanted to keep a close eye on Anne because she was struggling so bad, but having another adult in our house pretty much all the time has been wearing on me. Anne doesn't do much of anything to help around the house, and anytime there is a mention of chores or cleaning, she will scoot off back to her apartment with some excuse. Whenever I bring this up to my wife, she will make excuses for Anne and say that she is a guest, so we can't expect her to help around the house. Anne is also now very different around our kids. She used to be a very involved and fun aunt and would babysit for us so we could have date nights. But now, she refuses to be left alone with the kids for even short periods of time because she says it is bad for her mental health after what happened. The other day, I asked my wife if she can ask Anne to watch the kids on Valentine's Day so we can go out together, and she refused and said I should know we can't ask that of her. It started a fight between us about Anne, and I expressed a lot of frustration with how Anne is always at our house, and I don't like it. I made the mistake of saying, "It's been 6 months, how much longer are we going to do this?" That pissed off my wife, and she called me a heartless jerk. Before anyone asks, yes, Anne is in therapy, and from what I can tell, she is doing much better emotionally and mentally. I've never said anything about this to her, but her boyfriend breaking up with her was a blessing. The guy was a loser, and I don't think he would have been a good father. I understand my wife feels responsible for Anne, but I also feel like she has a responsibility to keep me happy too. Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. 1. She is a guest, so we can't expect her to help around the house. Guest most certainly can help clean up the house they are visiting staying at for extended nights at a time. It's expected in my family. 2. I understand my wife feels responsible for Anne, but I also feel like she has a responsibility to keep me happy too. Honestly, you both have a responsibility to each other, and there seems to be a lack of communication between you both. Time for a serious talk. 3. I made the mistake of saying, "It's been 6 months. How much longer are we going to do this?" Equals, this needed to be said. You aren't being respected. Your boundaries aren't being respected by your wife. Not the idiot. Anne may be getting help, but the next help needed will be for your marriage, I imagine. Comment 2. Not the idiot. The she's a guest ship sailed when this became an open invitation crash here, whenever situation with her own room. Guests should have a fixed time frame by which point they're out. As much as she's gone through a trauma and she needs support, the support she's currently getting isn't enough, or it's enabling her. Suggest that if she's still processing being around kids, then why is she living under the same roof as 3 of them? Surely her apartment won't have kids, and your wife can stay there with her for emotional support. It's got to be affecting the kids too. I've no doubt there are expectations being asked of them for Anne's sake, and in her mindset, it's more likely to be walking on eggshells around her trauma. Now, for the update. Hey everyone, thanks for all the support on my last post. I'm back with an update, and let me tell you, it's been a tense couple of weeks. So, after the Valentine's Day blow-up, things got even more tense at home. My wife and I were barely speaking, and Anne was walking around like she owned the place. I thought things couldn't get worse, but boy was I wrong. Just last week, I came home early from work to find Anne sunbathing in our backyard, topless. I was shocked, to say the least. Our kids were at school, thank goodness, but that's not the point. When I confronted her about it, she just shrugged and said she didn't think it was a big deal, since no one was supposed to be home. I told my wife about it, and she actually defended Anne, saying she's just trying to feel comfortable in her own skin after everything she's been through. I couldn't believe it. It felt like I was living in some alternate reality where my feelings didn't matter at all. But wait, it gets juicier. Remember how I mentioned Anne's ex-boyfriend was a loser? Well, turns out he's been trying to get back into her life. He showed up at our house one evening, begging for Anne to talk to him. My wife let him in, and they all sat down for a chat while I was banished to the den. I could hear them laughing and reminiscing about old times. It was like a slap in the face. The next day, I found out from my 10-year-old that Anne had been telling the kids about how their uncle might be coming around more often. I was livid. This guy was no role model, and now he was being invited back into our lives? I tried to talk to my wife about setting boundaries, but she accused me of being unsupportive. She said Anne needed us, and if that meant her ex being around, then so be it. I felt like I was losing my grip on my own family. And then the bomb dropped. My wife sat me down and told me that she's pregnant. We hadn't planned on having more kids, and with everything going on, the timing couldn't be worse. I was happy about the baby, but also overwhelmed. My wife seemed to think this would fix everything, like a new baby would just make all our problems disappear. But here's the kicker. Anne has been acting strange ever since she found out. She's been more distant, and I've caught her giving my wife these long, sad looks. I can't help but wonder if she's thinking about her own loss. Now, let's talk about the chores situation. It's gotten out of hand. Anne still doesn't lift a finger, and my wife is now doing everything for her, like she's some kind of queen. I tried to put my foot down and told Anne she needed to start helping out, or go back to her apartment. That led to another huge fight with my wife, who accused me of being cruel. Just when I thought things couldn't get any more chaotic, my wife's and Anne's parents decided to drop by unannounced. They're the type who criticize everything and anything. They started in on how we're enabling Anne and how she needs to grow up. It was humiliating, especially since my wife just sat there and took it, not defending our choices at all. But here's where karma comes into play, in its own subtle way. Anne's ex, the one who's been hanging around again, he got a job offer in another state and decided to take it. He left last week, and Anne has been a mess ever since. She's finally realizing that she can't rely on him or us to keep her life together. And as for the chores, well, Anne accidentally broke our dishwasher while trying to use it for the first time. She had no choice but to learn how to wash dishes by hand, and now she's been helping out more around the house. It's not a lot, but it's a start. If you like this video, you'll probably like these too. Also, while you're here, please consider subscribing. It's your support that keeps this channel alive and allows me to make better and longer videos. Have a great day.